Good afternoon, good morning, and good day. It's your boy, Grungo Humungo, and I am here to throw my hat in the ring once again. You may know me from my last video where I explained to you why the Deep of Night mode is actually my favorite game mode of all time, and it has no flaws whatsoever. In fact, Guardian and Revenant are so strong, I think they should be nerfed, and Iron Eye deserves more buffs to be competitively viable. And getting into Depth 5 didn't send me into a spiraling depression that killed my love for the game and prevented me from uploading anything for about a month or so. If you can't tell I'm joking by now, I have no idea what to do for you, man. You might need to work on social cues or something, maybe get some therapy. Honestly, I don't know. But I'm just messing around. Okay, let's get back here, all right? And if you're wondering about the background footage, this just happens to be a run I did back in the first week or so of the release of the Deep of Night mode. This was a Depth 4 expedition I did with two randoms. One of them was playing Iron Eye, the other was playing Guardian. It's up there for no particular reason. Don't mind it, don't worry about it. Hell, don't even acknowledge it. It's all good. Pretend it's not even there. What really matters here is the topic at hand. So let's ask ourselves the question, and the reason you clicked on this video, I would assume, is which is easier in Elden Ring Nightreign, solo runs or trio runs? Now, I've seen some discussions in forums, videos, and comment sections, you know, the real marketplace of ideas and philosophical debate, with some compelling and less compelling arguments on both sides. Some think that solo runs are harder because you have less windows of opportunity to do damage, while others say trios are harder because you get paired with bad teammates who can cost you the whole run. Arguments also range between saying solos are easier because you can easily get multiple revives, and trios are easier because your teammates can carry you to victory. But in my experience, the answer is a little more complicated than you think. For starters, in the base game mode, I'd say yes, you can argue that solos are easier than trios, especially if you manage your runes and get up to 3 Wending Graces. This gives you a higher chance of beating the boss via maximizing the number of revives you get without having to rely on the competency of your random teammates, because it will always be a mixed bag unless you're playing with friends. But even then, if your friends are at the same skill level as you are and you're good enough at the game, playing solo will still feel easier because of the damage scaling. Now, I'm not the numbers guy, and I may be wrong here, but when I'm in trios, I'm not chunking the Night Lord for big yellow damage as much as I am in solos. And if you've seen my live streams, you best believe I'm beating that boss hands down, no questions asked, if I'm hitting those big yellow chunky boys. I'm not even that good at this game, but whether or not you find solos easier than trios usually tends to be based around your skill level. And after playing a few hours here and there for the first few months of the game's release, I found myself feeling more confident soloing a run than needing anyone's help. This isn't anything to actually be proud of, but the vibe just kind of felt better overall than playing with randoms. But that's the thing. I will admit that I may be coping in terms of the actual damage being dealt. This is very psychological. And the reason I say this is because Stilovsky put out a video breaking down the damage scaling of trios versus solos, and it would seem that scaling actually favors trios in the overall expedition.
This is a spreadsheet that shows scalings for the solo, duos and trios. For simplicity, we are gonna look only at health bars, and this is the health pool in solos, in duos, and then here in trios. If you would take this number and put it into calculator, then times 3, it turns out that the scaling in trios is actually less than just times 3. And this is generally like a common thing. So the conclusion is pretty simple. You outscale. Overall, the run in trios is simply easier, and the easier run, the more you can prepare.
On paper, it turns out that you actually do less damage in solos because of the health bars. It's not simply tripled in trios. So if all 3 players are pulling the same amount of weight and doing equal damage, then on an individual basis, you need to do less damage to beat a boss than in a solo run. But things feel a little off here. I'm not going to say Stilovsky is wrong, but at one point in the video, he states that having bad teammates is a straw man argument, because it's an unfair comparison, and that we should only be comparing runs where all players are of equal skill for the argument to be logically sound.
I have seen people also saying something along the lines that trios are much harder because usually you are playing with bad players, and therefore it's harder because your teammates are useless, which is just a ridiculous way of approaching how you consider the scaling works. If you want to compare fairly, then if you are looking at the solo play of someone that is decent, then you also have to look at the trios play where like 3 players in the session are decent. As simple as that. You cannot make a strawman where you are a decent player and you're playing with 2 people that are very bad at the game, and then judge it of that like solos is easier for you because you are pretty good whereas your teammates are terrible. No, every single of you in the session has to be like a somewhat same skill level to fairly compare what type of queue is simply easier and what's not.
That does make him theoretically correct, you know, on paper, but in practice, when you're playing Nightreign's base game, in what reality are you always paired with teammates who are all of equal skill? I swear, some of these players have me genuinely baffled on how they figured out to turn on their PC, let alone launch Nightreign. To be fair, maybe when playing with friends, you're pairing yourself with good players because it's your common interest, but with randoms, more often than not, you'll be paired with players who will absolutely cost you the run by putting you in a scenario where you have to solo a Night Lord with 3-player health scaling because your average Revenant player insisted on playing their character at a melee range only to realize they don't know where the dodge button is on their keyboard or controller, and your average Guardian player decided the best time to use their ult was at the start of the fight to deal negative damage to the boss for about 0.469 seconds of invulnerability for the team, and then gets themselves clapped in 2 hits because they don't know how to manage their stamina bar when in Steel Guard. But maybe it's my own fault at the end of the day because I insist on picking them both up when they're down on 3 bars, and the amount of times I hit them, I could have been hitting the boss and I might have been able to carry the run that way instead of playing babysitter the whole fucking fight. Obviously, my example is anecdotal and extremely exaggerated, you know, for comedic purposes here, but you can't say this never happens, right? Like, in practice, this is a real thing, and playing with randoms is always a mixed bag. Sometimes you get carried, but most of the time, it feels like you're getting anchored, when you're usually the one who has to carry. So if you play as often as I do, honestly, you're better off playing alone to guarantee yourself a win, or play with your friends to guarantee yourself some fun. And for someone who plays at that level of skill, I would assume that Steel would rely on himself to guarantee a win, as he's usually the one to carry an expedition when he's playing with others. I mean, I don't even consider myself that good at this game or anything like that. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea here, but I still do solo expeditions knowing I'm winning 99% of the time if I'm just playing to win, but I always doubt myself on how it's going to go when I play with randoms, especially when they've gone down 4 times to the Nox duo at an Everjail. But here's where things get a little trickier, and Steel becomes completely correct in theory as well as in practice. The Deep of Night mode. If you've watched my last video, you know exactly how I feel about the Deep of Night mode, and if you haven't, take the time to go watch it. I mean, honestly, what are you doing with your time? Go see it, it's fun, I promise. Anyways, when it comes to the Deep of Night, the reality shifts because the fair comparison that the Polish little bro speaks of becomes the reality rather than just a theory. The higher the depth, the more the bad players get filtered out. You don't see that many players who don't know what they're doing, since they are much less likely to make it there in the first place without having a hard carry. And even then, the average good player, air quotes, isn't going to carry an Iron Eye who doesn't know to keep his mark going, who only uses his abilities to space, and insists on range maxing to deal 0.3 damage per arrow instead of actually contributing to the team. At least their passive gives me better drops, so still less of a detriment than any other pick on the roster, but holy fuck, even when the players are dog shit, Iron Eye is still broken and the best option for someone who blew off their hands and has a rock in their head. I'm going to cry. Now, some could argue that a player of high enough skill would have an easier time playing solo even in the Deep of Night, and this may be true, but I would still argue that's a personal feeling to them the same way it's a personal feeling to me. Players who get to depths 4 and 5 have practically become no-hit challenge runners, and honestly, good for them, kudos, but that requires a lot of skill, time, patience, and dedication to achieve. But you have to remember, the question is, which is easiest in general, solos or trios? And it turns out that if we elaborate further on trios, it might actually be the easier option in the Deep of Night mode. Hell, even in the regular mode. So hear me out for a second. Players reaching depth 5 are usually playing with friends or randoms who can actually carry their own weight and keep consistent damage on enemies by rotating aggro, and are usually very able to pick each other up if one of the other players were to go down. At this point, all players are dealing equal equal amounts of damage, or are at least capable enough to defend their elite recluse or revenant players who got the perfect drops and builds to melt the boss at speedrunning levels faster than any solo player ever could. So to finally answer the question a little more objectively, which is actually easier, solo or trios, well, I'd say for the average player, trios for sure. But for an elite turbo pro ultra mega no-hit challenge run gamer using a banana in their ass as a controller, contracting their sphincter for the most precise frame perfect dodge inputs, honestly, probably trios as well, because even though you might be a vibes guy like me and you might feel like it's easier on your own, we need to look at it more objectively. Like, let's be real, dude. The amount of leniency you get from having teammates take aggro and the time you can spend dishing out damage with greater windows of opportunity is insane. There's also the fact that if you fuck up, it isn't a total annihilation of your run. Your teammates can carry. And yes, you're relying on your teammates to actually be good, but in high depths, that shouldn't even be a factor since the more casual players have already been filtered out. Second, even in a scenario where all the players are bad at the game and wouldn't be able to solo run to begin with, the game was kind of designed around that concept. Plus, they benefit from teamwork and have a higher likelihood of completing the run due to the ability to share that same aggro and pick themselves up in a way they wouldn't be able to do if they were just playing on their own. Yeah, it's a skill issue, but Nightreign was kind of designed for teamwork to make the dream work. And finally, the game's been out for a bit now, so anyone still playing has gotten at least a little better at the game, so chances of them anchoring people down to the point of a total loss, it's gotten much lower, like objectively speaking. I mean, these things may change when there's a sale, but for now the community seems to be in a pretty good spot in terms of skill last I checked. But maybe I'm off base here, I haven't actually played this game in over a month. Now, if you're the kind of guy to be like, skill issue, and you plan on dedicating your legacy to being able to say that the solo experience is easier in a ranked PvE game, remember that it will give you nothing but hollow bragging rights you can share with your few friends in a game that no one thinks is that difficult anymore. And that's time you will never get back on this plane of existence.
One certainty in this life is that inevitably we will leave our mortal coils as our bodies slowly fail and decay, and each and every one of us shall be forgotten to the sands of time. No history will exist beyond the heat death of this universe, and humanity's impact on the cosmos will fade into the very same nothingness where it all began.
So remember to like and subscribe, but for real though, I'm just messing around. At the end of the day, if solos are easier for you, as long as you're having fun, that's what really matters. And speaking of fun things, the DLC is right around the corner. I'm sure you guys are as excited about it as I am. I also plan on doing a little more than just Nightreign on the channel, as I've been live streaming a lot of League of Legends recently, and I'm also thinking of doing more game reviews in the style of my Way of the Samurai 3 video. If you haven't seen that yet, do yourself a favor and go watch that right now. It's got monkeys in it. It's my favorite video on the channel so far. In fact, if ever it reaches 10k views, I might need to do a review of the sequel, Way of the Samurai 4. Anyways, if you agree or disagree with my takes, feel free to discuss it in the comments. I actually love the banter and interacting with the community. I do rage bait a little here and there, but remember, I'm just some guy on the internet. Like, don't actually take me that seriously. I'm not a figure of authority or someone who's like out to get you. I'm really just a silly little guy saying silly little things. Or am I, Robert? I know what you did. I'll tell everyone who you really are. Until then, I'll see you next time, you little freaks. And kisses.